Approximately 4,000 years ago, Micronesia's brave seafaring ancestors set sail against the wind and into the sun, into the great abyss of the Pacific Ocean. They set sail in hand-carved wooden canoes. Propulsion made possible from wind caught in hand-woven pandana sails and ocean elements. Our masterful navigators were guided by an ancient knowledge of celestial navigation using the stars at night and currents, birds, fish, and clouds by day. They landed upon our shores thousands of years ago, and with this single historical event, the initial human settlement of the Micronesia region began. As their descendants, we are people of the ocean, Remetau. We are Tautautanu, people of these islands in Micronesia. Guampedia embarked on an educational outreach effort a few years ago in partnership with the University of Guam, Traditions Affirming Our Seafaring Ancestry, and Pacific Asia Travel Association's Micronesia chapter to help connect and promote our region of Micronesia through history, cultural heritage, and our natural environment. Micronesia is not simply a geographical region comprised of 2,500 tiny islands. It is a vast repository of ancient and collective knowledge rooted in cultural values, languages, and traditions that are framed in sustainability. Our final presenter, who hails from Micronesia and rooted and grown here in the Marianas, is currently an assistant professor in the University of Pittsburgh's Civil and Engineering Department, Environmental Engineering Department, and serves as the assistant director for the Mascaro Center for Sustainable Innovation. Dr. David Sanchez is the program director for the Mascaro Center Sustainability Programs, overseeing the Masters in Sustainable Engineering and the undergraduate certificate in sustainability. He coordinates the Design Expo that showcases 90+ projects for more than 400 students every semester, and serves as the director for the Manufacturing Assistance Center's Makerspace, Constellation Energy's Inventor Labs, the series workshops, and some engineering collaborations in the community of Homewood. His research is focused on identifying sustainable designs that address the water and energy grand challenges in the natural and built environment on a local and regional scale. As Dr. Anita noted, he is here in Guam along with UPitt's engineering students, conducting its first Sustainability of Island Nations. Dr. David?
Sizos Maasi for the invitation for the Mailatati program from Dr. Enriquez and for all of you attending today. Nanu si David Sanchez, familia in Kotla, Galaides, and Fungu. I'm very happy to be here today, really for a chance to share and discuss with you some of the things that I found along this long journey of academia and coming back. I was also very appreciative of Lazaro's presentation because many of his findings do resonate and resonate strongly. So allow me to share my screen, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell a couple of stories, but also some findings of why I think island wisdom works in the 21st century. So the first thing I want to start with is actually a story that was told to me probably one of my first years in Pittsburgh. And so there was this idea, it's a hazy image, but it's this idea of a farmer, and this farmer had been working in the field all their life, and they grew up going to school, but predominantly spending their life working on the farm. And as they did this, they constantly heard of all the riches that all those who were working in the diamond mines were making, finding these massive jewels, and that with one easy strike, the pick, that they would be able to go ahead and retire for the rest of their lives. And so upon hearing these stories, they would create a narrative in this young farmer's mind. Soon enough, the farmer grew a little bit older, was about a teenager, and was thinking about what to do next. And the teenager always worked with a variety of different plants across this diverse field, this diverse farm, and always worked with a lot of the different rocks in the local flora and fauna. The farmer left eventually because the farmer aspired to strike it rich, if you will, one of these mines. The farmer closed up the farm, left, and traveled 1,000 miles just to find one of the mines and decided to find some employment or some work. As the farmer started working, he started to look and was eager to find what this diamond is that everybody was after. And upon his first bucket of finding them, he realized that the rocks that he had in this first bucket of diamonds were the rocks that he had seen strewn about his entire farm, his entire life. And so I share this story is because maybe it's apt a little bit to my journey of coming back home to see that we are, and we always have been sitting on an acre of diamonds. A better analogy might not be the farm, but maybe that of voyaging, where oftentimes, as Lazaro talked about, the academic voyage is, rife with different challenges, different barriers, different things to learn, different languages, ways of thinking, mindsets that contrast our own culture in very, very unique but significant ways. And so you can imagine someone on a voyage trying to find and pursue other things that might be able to help a community would go around and then come back to bring what they've learned. Here is Pittsburgh, the city of Pittsburgh. And so it's along the three rivers, one of the largest watersheds in the entire country, of the US. It has a lot of history, especially with the industry, and is, quite a vibrant city. I want to share these with you just so you get some context of where it is I kind of work and the perspective I'm coming from when coming back to engage the university, local organizations, the government here back on our home island. This is the University of Pittsburgh, and you can see here, this is the massive Cathedral of Learning, the Swanson School of Engineering. This is also where the center, where I'm an assistant director, is. But a massive campus, one of the oldest universities, in the country. It's over 200 years old, and here's a sprawling campus, a sprawling urban campus. In my role, I am responsible for doing a few things, as mentioned in the introduction. One is, it's education, research, and service, right? Here's the research part. I run the Sustainable Design Labs, and we try to work on these grand challenges for water and for energy and even for controlled environmental agriculture systems. These are significant challenges for engineers. And I'm sharing this with you because I want you to understand that, from my perspective, I'm looking constantly trying to find some of the best ways to find these solutions and to educate engineers in sustainability. And as I'm looking at this, is a resounding question. Right? What's the best approach to teaching and researching sustainability? Under this question you see on the slide is, it's probably some of my experiences from my undergraduate, degree. Right? I was able to do these things at the University of Portland. I had these different experiences and went around internationally. Across the world, across these programs, still constantly looking for what is the guiding values and principles to teaching and researching sustainability. There are all sorts of best practices out there. There are all sorts of conventions and frameworks that you could use, but at the heart of the matter, culture is essential. Culture is the principle on which you build this. And so in the search for that, part of engaging is how do you do this regardless of where you are in the world? So the answer, before I go through some stories to support it, if you're looking for the conclusion for the whole presentation, Island Wisdom is like having 4,000 years of research and development on culture, right? That wisdom that is distilled is tried and true, not in terms of, a mathematical algorithm, not in terms of, recent research, but lived experience in the context of environmental change, lived experience in the context of community decision making, lived experience in terms of the context of development, right? Economic development, right? And it's important for us to pay attention to that. So let me take you on a quick journey just so you can get a scale, a sense of scale of where University of Pittsburgh is. Here's one of the buildings we have. Here's the Mosquero Center. One of the other places I work on Pitt's campus. If you zoom out, here are those three rivers I mentioned and you saw in one of those first photos. And there's University of Pittsburgh. If we zoom out again, you'll see this is, here is the eastern seaboard and the right side of the United States. And if you zoom out one more time, here over is, Pittsburgh, and then here are these, 5 islands. And so as you look about this, you're like, wow, well, islands present a unique place to study because of the fact that so many of the dynamics on an island are traceable and tractable. But you cannot make a decision, just like, if you have a large family, you can't really make a decision or, make some sort of, do some sort of activity on one side of the island without the other side of the island knowing, right? That's very, very important because it means you also have to be sensitive about the repercussions of your decisions, the consequences of your decisions. As you make a policy, you can't use time and distance and landmass, right, to kind of ignore the consequences or delay them. You understand and know them immediately. And if you do not, it's not only to your community's peril, it's to your own. So these are 5 islands, islands and island chains, right? So there's the Galapagos there, Aleutian Islands there, Samoa, Hawaii, and over here, the farthest one, dare I say, from Pittsburgh, here's Hawaii and here's Guam, is the one that I actually think speaks loudest, right? I mean, Micronesia, I guess broadly, is the one that speaks loudest to me in identifying the best practices for teaching and researching sustainability. Why, you might ask? Well, if you look at this island and you look at its placement, right, there are all sorts of global phenomena that are converging on this island, whether you realize it or not. Right? Some of these global phenomena might have to do with pollution or environmental change. Some have to do with geopolitics. Some have to do with the disruption of what was normally the economic paradigm, right? Heavy on capitalist and industry. Now with all these digital innovations and this digital connection, it's transforming and we feel a lot of it. The other part is distance, transportation, logistics. All of these, this island has to bear, for better or worse. But as I look at this and I look at these converging phenomena, I see it as one of the best classrooms. And I see its culture being distilled, having experienced it, myself being from here, with my family, with the community, the culture being one of the best things that you can offer not only the people of Guam or the people of Micronesia, but also those in the world who are constantly hungry for how to create a culture around sustainability research and education. So let me give you examples of some of these phenomena or why an engineer would travel clear across the world, even if I wasn't from Guam. I think it's a fair question or objection to say, well, Dr. Sanchez or David, you're just, you want to come back to Guam simply because of, cultural nostalgia, or you want to come back to Guam, because, your preference is, to be home, etc. Even if I wasn't from Guam, right? The acre of diamonds that it sits on has so much to offer, to the world in terms of culture, education, and research. Here's an example. If you're a structural engineer, do you know one of the places that actually has to deal with the highest wind loads, in the country? It's Guam. What about the majority of Cat 5, typhoons, right? And the largest sustained gust, in the country? It's Guam. What about the highest intensity rainfall, right? Like something like 7 inches an hour, 8 inches an hour. If you look at the engineering, tables in terms of what you're designing for, Guam, right? There's more to it, right? Because of this, our engineers have actually had to be that much better, had to be extraordinarily good at what they do in order for certain things to survive. That analogy is apt for other aspects of the university, of our community, be it in business, be it in policy, be it in social work, be it in economics, right? You have to be that much more creative because of the extra constraints and challenges. Here's another part. Resilient infrastructure begins with geotechnics. So here's Guam on the right-hand side. If you look at the United States Geological Survey, what they do is based on geological activity, they assign a number for different places across the country. And they're saying, you know what, the seismic acceleration that you have to design for is this. Guam has has basically the highest rating, one of the highest ratings. And so if you want to be an engineer, like, well, if you're going to design anything from Guam, you have to be not only really competent, you have to be careful about how you make these buildings. 2.5 Gs is what geotechnical engineers have to look at. And so if you're wanting to see the best, if you're wanting to engage in the best or attempt to create some of the best designs, why not go where some of the biggest challenges are? Why else, right? Outside of its unique situation in engaging or seeing these phenomena, these environmental and physical phenomena, what else does Guam have to offer? What else does the wisdom of being on the island have to offer? That history spans 4,000 years. And so as you look at that and how they grew, how they planned, how they propagated not only from here, but in their language across the islands, how they traded, a lot of that has key significance for those who are trying to solve some of our global grand challenges now. How did they trade? What did they do about their waste? How did they manage some of these typhoons? What did they do in terms of community decision making? Those are apt for us to look at even in today's world. Here's one of my favorite ones: ancient innovators. As you go around the globe, you'll see that many boats and ferrying vessels have or were inspired by the original designs presented here in the Pacific by Micronesia and these seafaring people. Right, just read any history book, especially when it comes to Spanish contact. You'll see that they're quite impressed by the design of the hull. While the whole world typically changed, the on the stern, here you change the two sides so that one was flat and served as a keel and the other one round, allowing you to cut through the waters and navigate them quite easily. What an impressive thing that has now changed the world in boat design. So with all of that, you know, how do you go about teaching and researching sustainability? What's the best practice? What you have in front of you are 17 goals from the United Nations. These are not comprehensive in terms of these are the only goals, or these are these are sufficient to achieving every goal we ever wanted. But these are currently the consensus around the biggest challenges our world faces in terms of sustainability. Look at all of them. Look at all 17. If you're looking to try and solve some of them, it is important to understand, right, in what context are you going to solve them? How do you create people to think across all these boundaries? To think in a context, how do you get them to consider, the social fabric, well-being, but also be, technically competent? It's a real challenge, but because it requires both a personal and a professional formation. It's not enough to just know your numbers. It's not enough to just know the tables and be able to plug and chug and get a design or X equals 3. A lot of it is the formation and personal formation of these of our students, of our community, of our universities. So these are the challenges. There are kind of a couple ways to think about them, right? There's 17. I wouldn't expect anybody to kind of sit here and in 5 seconds memorize them. But I want to give you a couple of frameworks that we often think about them. Where do these 17 goals come from? How did the 192 countries decide on these? Well, first of all, sustainability is about human flourishing. So if you were to break down, this aspect, well, it's really dimensions of human development, right? Enhancing human abilities, creating conditions. This is a slide, from one of our Mike Goodhart over at University of Pittsburgh. If you think about this in terms of those goals, really what we're after is human flourishing. How do you enhance human abilities? How do you create conditions for human development, right? How do you do that in participation, the environment, right? Knowledge, standard of living. Very important to think about it that way. Here's the other part that sustainability is often broken down to. It's broken down into the 3 pillars, right? The economy, the society, the biosphere. If you wanted a quick way to memorize them, it's people, prosperity, and planet. Right? If you think about all of those, that's what it attempts to cover. And so as you see here, here's the breakdown. The biosphere, these goals right here, 15 and 14, 6 and 13, right, really are about the biosphere. This other one in the middle, really about society. And these top ones really have a lot to do with, the economy. So now I give you those, right? If you chose one goal, like how would you measure it? Well, I'm going to choose, clean water and sanitation, right? And maybe you want to, choose energy. What's really, really challenging about this in terms of teaching sustainability is that these 17 goals seem nice and perfectly delineated. The fact of the matter is they're all interconnected. They're all interconnected, and the complexity of them can only be found if you were to dive deep on one of them. So let me show you a clear example. Again, I'm going to choose, clean water. In many developed places, right, in many developed countries or with infrastructure, you're including our own. Oftentimes, there's a use of water, right, for cleaning, for making energy. So as you look at this graph, all these red arrows, that's where all the energy flows, right? So the energy flows out of this power plant, out to these transmission lines, and they go to the city and residences and commercial users, right? And so look right here, this goes to the water treatment plant, this goes to the residences where people are using all the energy. Look at the water. The water, right, comes from here, goes into the power plant, meaning the power plant actually needs this water in order to generate energy. And it goes and flows, again, in the same way. It turns out that these two are inherently connected, meaning you need water to generate your energy and you need energy to generate clean water, as you can see down here. It's the energy water nexus is how it's described. These are just one of the consequences or one of the challenges adjusting any one of them. So if you were to try and tweak and optimize for energy without ever considering water, it'd be a descending spiral, and you're bound to run into some major problems. At the same time, if you were going to consider aspects of optimizing your water without ever considering what your energy needs are, again, you have a design that's going to fall flat or be not comprehensive and not serve everybody around in the long term. Turns out that as you take all these goals, 17 goals, right? I'm not wanting you to read it. I just want you to pay attention to the side here, okay? Because oftentimes when we think sustainability, all of us, right? When we think sustainability, we're like, you know what? If I just optimize one goal, it's every other goal is gonna, it's like floating all boats. If I lift the tide on one, it's gonna lift all boats. That's not necessarily true. These are challenging things for sustainability. There are often trade-offs, right? If you look over here again, here are all the goals, and here are these colors here. What do these colors mean? Well, these colors mean that if they're green, right, this goal number one, for example, has a lot of synergies, meaning if you do optimize or improve that one, you actually improve many of the other sustainability goals too. So the more green it is, the better, right? If you have it in this yellow, it's kind of neutral. But if you have this red here or this orange here, if those colors show up in any of the goals, what you actually have is you actually have trade-offs, meaning improving that goal actually inhibits or is counts negatively towards some of your other goals just by the nature of what that goal is, right? So if I were to improve industry, innovation, and infrastructure, it might be a challenge for my biosphere. It might be a challenge for life below water. It might be a challenge for clean water and sanitation, right? Whatever those are, but those are trade-offs. Now, how do you manage this? You will need, as students or as researchers, many people will need to manage trade-offs. Who decides? That's not a science question. That's not an engineering question. That's often a community and ethics question. And so again, if you succumb to, hey, I can design my way out of these challenges just by being really, really, really clever with my engineering, again, it'll fall flat. It'll fall short, and dare I say, it'll be hurtful to the community that you're serving. So when I say it's a personal and a professional formation, here's where the challenge lies. How do you teach them about these complexities? How do you teach them about these trade-offs while being really, really good at their design so that when it's appropriate, they can apply it and do it, in full faith and get everything done for the betterment of society. A really challenging point. Let me expand upon that because I told you those are a bunch of trade-offs. Here are the indicators. Remember, there's 17 goals. On those 17 goals, there's about 160 targets. Here are the ways that they measure it. Here's 232 indicators, right? And what you're seeing under each goal is these are the indicators that they're trying to measure to determine how well they're doing on this goal. Here's number 11, right? All these under here are the indicators of how they're doing on goal number 11. Here's number 16. Under 16, how are they doing on all these goals? And they're trying to measure them. But you're probably wondering, why do you have these traffic light, colors on below it and for all these indicators? Turns out that not all the data is available, right? In terms of not being able to measure, not palpable or negligible, when it comes to measuring these. So the green ones, there are some numbers, globally for them. The yellow ones, right? Really, there's official metrics, but it's incomplete. The data is incomplete or outdated. And then for the red ones, right? Currently, monitoring is impossible. So you're trying to manage and get all this data across the world, and you're trying to go ahead and coordinate it. Fact of the matter is nearly impossible currently. So how do you do this? How do you try to manage sustainability? How do you change the world? Well, by creating models that can be translated, that are situated within its context, right? Those are things that islands have done consistently. And they're very, that's where the island wisdom comes from. So here's another part. I use Pennsylvania for this, as an example. Okay, instead of, let's separate out Pennsylvania from these global indicators and world. But this is the electricity generation in Pennsylvania. And let's say we were going to say, of all these energy sources, we were going to cancel one and pick up another. Well, it turns out, let's say everybody agreed generally that this was a cost benefit ratio, right? That there were more benefits to everybody in Pennsylvania to get rid of, biomass and oil, right? Biomass and coal or something like that, right? In Pennsylvania. Well, normally when someone shares that, they say, well, the overall benefits are greater than the overall cost. What really often is, misleading is the fact that oftentimes the benefits benefit a large section, and the cost are borne by a very small section. And that's really hard, because if you are a community and you subscribe to Inafat Maule, Chenchuli, or any of those values, then what the fact of the matter is, if one person or a group is bearing those costs, it falls flat. Right? If it's not equally shared, there's no reciprocity, if there's no way for everybody to kind of come in and join and participate, it falls short. I think this is my last slide, and it's another story. So I said, I finish with these stories, because the question is, well, why does island wisdom work in the 21st century? So it's not necessarily an island, but before I led this trip to Guam, I was asked by the International Office to lead one to Brazil. I had studied there, I'd learned the language there, I did research there. And so this is not necessarily where it happened, but it does give a sense of place. So down in Brazil, right, they have great solar radiation, solar access, and so it makes sense to go ahead and install solar. So in the northeast of Brazil, you can get really calm places where you can actually put in your solar panels and everything will work. The challenge is there's also socioeconomic stratification, introducing this new technology. So as one community, and this is not this community in here, but as one community was implementing them, some of their things were being vandalized. So what do I mean? The panels, the batteries were being taken, the solar were kind of being destroyed. So they're thinking, well, what are we going to do? We need to kind of protect this asset. It's going to be something beneficial for the community, because it allows them to be more resilient in terms of energy production. It allows them access to electricity. And so, this is an overall benefit. How do we go about thinking to solve this problem? So they go about thinking, and then all sorts of ideas come up, right? So naturally, many of the ideas you and I would think of, oh, let's hire a security guard. Okay, let's go ahead and put a fence around it, right? Let's put some sort of alarm system. Let's put a notice, right, so that people can stay away. Let's instill a certain barrier. Increase fines. There's all sorts of ideas which, dare I say, are quite conventional. Well, what one of them actually ended up doing was, Brazil is quite a Catholic country, so they actually took an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe and wrapped it around the battery. And from then on, right, none of the batteries were being marred or vandalized. The lesson here is that understanding culture was quite important to creating the best designs. If I were to say it another way, right, your engineering or your design or your policy is only as good as your anthropology is deep. Let me repeat that. Your engineering, your policy, your design is only as good as your anthropology is deep. So if you come into a place and you don't know how to quiet your cleverness, and you don't know how to sit and listen, and you don't have the humility to really engage and seek the wisdom from those who have lived there, right, and engage and work with them and collaborate on their lived experiences, you will lose the community, but you'll also lose the opportunity to create a more sustainable design. So I think that's about it. There's a picture of Guam. Sizos Masi, everybody, for being here. Really, is grateful for the invitation from the University of Guam, from Guampedia. Really, again, grateful to Dr. Anita, to Lazaro, and to Guampedia for all they did today. With that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And I'm happy to take questions, comments, short songs, you know, yeah, whatever it is they like.
And on behalf of Guampedia, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon in our Culture of Connecting virtual outreach series. And to Lazaro Kanata, our very own, and also to our board president and senior provost of University of Guam, Dr. Anita Borja Enriquez. Sizos Ma'asi, everyone.